Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stories with Mrs. Reed, where today we will be finishing up our story, Jonathan and the Tree. Chapter 4. One day, Jonathan returned home sad. His spirits were low and he was heavily dragging his feet. His mother, who immediately noticed that something was wrong, asked if something had happened in the kindergarten. But Jonathan didn't want to tell her anything, and he had had his lunch silently, barely noticing what he put into his mouth. "Jonathan," his mother eventually said at the end of the meal, "perhaps if you tell me what happened, it will help a little." Jonathan looked at his mother and replied, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Yotam insulted me. He said I am weak and small and that no one wants to be my friend. He said that if I didn't come out to play with him and the other boys, they would never play with me again, ever." And after a short pause, he added, "And indeed, no one played with me today, and I spent the whole day by myself." "Why, Mum, don't they want to play with me?" Jonathan's mother hugged him tight and didn't know what to say. It wasn't the first time Jonathan had complained that his friends had bullied him and that he was lonesome. Yotam was actually a good friend of his, and even came over to visit him a couple of times. Jonathan was quieter than most kids. He was dreamy and liked playing by himself. He could sit for hours playing with a few wooden blocks that he arranged as houses, airplanes in the sky, a forest, or they could even serve as children of the kindergarten or the neighborhood. He liked playing football and basketball and to be with friends. However, he always preferred the quiet and peaceful games. "You are not small or weak," his mother told him. "You are a charming, smart boy, and the rest of the kids are sure to find this out." "Maybe they don't like me because I'm not so good at football and not such a fast runner," Jonathan asked his mother quietly. "I really prefer playing other games." "I have an idea," cried his mother. "Why don't we invite one of your friends over? Maybe even Yotam." "No!" Jonathan shouted again, and the tears flooded his eyes, even though he tried hard not to cry again. His mother tried to console him. She took his favorite book and read it to him. She baked with him the cookies he always asked for, and they ate them together. But Jonathan would not be consoled, and after the meal he sat distressed under the mulberry tree, thinking sad thoughts. "I don't know all that much about human beings, but I thought of something." Jonathan heard the tree whispering softly. "I feel sad," said Jonathan, "and I want to sit here quietly for a while." And he went on, digging restlessly into the sandpit under the tree with an old metal spoon. "Fine," said the tree. "When you want to listen, let me know." Jonathan went on digging. He felt sorry for himself, and the more this sadness settled within him, the more he continued digging, and the hole in the ground grew bigger and bigger. A long while passed. Jonathan began to feel cold. He thought of going back in, and then he suddenly remembered that the tree had said, or what the tree had said, and became curious about it. "What did you want to tell me?" he asked. The tree spoke patiently on, as though he had never been stopped. "So, I don't know all that much about human beings, but I want to tell you a story about something that once happened to me. It may help." Jonathan waited. Time went by, and even he, who was used to the tree's slow pace, was beginning to lose his patience and asked, "What did you want to tell me?" "Once, many, many years ago, when I was too small and young, and there weren't many houses, streets, or electric poles by me, only a little forest with trees, bushes, and flowers, I had a friend, a little lemon tree. We loved each other dearly, and used to play together, talk to each other, and in full moon nights we would visit one another. The small lemon tree was beautiful and happy. The birds loved sitting on its branches, and little animals always played among its roots. And still it was never quite satisfied. It admired the big trees and always wanted to be like them. Once it wanted to be as strong as the oak tree. At other times it longed to become as tall as the cypress, as green as the pine, or as big as the mulberry trees. "You are a lemon tree," I would tell him again and again. "Lemon trees are wonderful trees, beautiful and fragrant, and they have lovely fruit that everybody loves." "You are right," he would say, "but they're so small, and the fruit is so sour. Why can't we all be taller and stronger?" Once I saw my friend the lemon tree making a great effort, all panting and sweating, What happened? I asked. Are you ill? It laughed and replied, On the contrary, I am happy and in great health. I am just trying to grow taller, and I am going to be as tall as the cypress. The following day, I saw it shaking all its young leaves and branches. What are you doing now? I asked. You shall soon see, it replied. I will look at you from above, and I will be as strong and as big as the oak tree. And so it went on, every day, trying to become one of the trees it admired. It wasn't happy. It forgot to eat and drink. It did not notice the birds and butterflies around it, and it hardly even spoke to me. With every day that passed, the little lemon tree became weaker. Every day its green leaves lost some of their brightness. Every day its branches were more bent. It became sick. You know, Jonathan, trees can also sometimes be ill and need to be taken care of, and they too sometimes need medicine. We didn't know what to do. We tried to help the little lemon tree. We all sent it helpful thoughts. All the trees around it sent it their energy through their roots in the earth. We sent birds that would sing from its top branches, and at night we sang ancient songs to it, songs that only trees can hear. At first, we noticed no improvement, and the little lemon tree stood bent, its branches sloping and its leaves a dull gray. It stood thus for a long time, but later on, it gradually began to get better. It looked healthier with every passing day, its leaves turning to their green color, its branches stretched up, and its roots grew deep in the earth. It became itself again, only that for a long while it remained quiet. It hardly spoke even with me, its best friend. It only exchanged a few words every night. One full moon night, after it had already fully recovered, the little lemon tree told me quietly, I thank you and all the other trees for helping me recover. But you know that my real cure was inside of me. I understood that I simply want to be a lemon tree. Jonathan had questions. He wanted to understand the story the tree had told him. He wanted to go on speaking to him, but the tree became all quiet. Jonathan already knew that he sometimes behaved like that. Sometimes the tree did not want to go on talking, and nothing could be done to change that. He went back home, silently had his supper. He listened quietly to his father's bedtime story and fell asleep. Chapter 5. In the morning, Jonathan woke up feeling awkward. He had been dreaming about a small lemon tree. Again and again it appeared in his dream, trying hard to be like other trees, very sick, bent over and gray, and then again all green and fresh. He lay in his bed, unable to remember what exactly he had dreamt, and yet knowing that something of importance had happened during the night. He understood something, but didn't know what. Never before had he felt like that. In any case, he noticed that his sadness and feeling of insult were gone, and he felt happy and full of energy for the new coming day. In the kindergarten, Jonathan played the games he had always liked. He spoke to the other kids, also to Jotam, as though nothing had happened. He hardly joined the wild games outside and mainly stuck to happily doing the things he liked. He wasn't embarrassed to play with the girls, did not hesitate to dress up with all kinds of strange costumes they had in the kindergarten. He built huge, strange buildings that never beforehand had he dared to build, because he was afraid of what the other kids might have said. And when Miriam, the kindergarten teacher, asked him to come and help serve the meal, he did so willingly. After a couple of days, the kindergarten teachers and the children all noticed that Jonathan had changed. They couldn't exactly say how, but it was evident that he was much happier than before. He played with all sorts of imaginative games, and he made up himself, and also dared to speak to children older than him, whom beforehand he had been too scared or bashful to approach. And another thing that happened was that the children wanted to join him and participate in his games. Some of them even wanted to visit his home and invited him to theirs. Also, his mother and father didn't exactly know what had happened to Jonathan and how come he all of a sudden had friends, but they were delighted for him and gladly hosted them. Only the tree naughtily shook its leaves, smiled to himself down among its roots, and was happy when more kids came to play in its branches. Jonathan's became stronger and happier, and that filled the old tree's heart with joy. And so the time passed. For Jonathan it went quickly and without too much thinking, and for the tree, slowly and comprehensively. Jonathan grew up and matured. He no longer played so often among the tree branches. He was too busy. He had new friends, and in any case, many different and new things interested him. From time to time, he would remember the tree, and then, when he wholeheartedly thought about him, he realized he could still speak with him, tell him things, and ask for advice. When Jonathan was in the 3rd grade, he went out to the yard one autumn morning and sat as before amongst the branches of the tree. He told the mulberry tree all about things he learned at school, about his teachers and friends. The tree listened to him deeply, in a manner only trees are capable of. And after some long moments, he said, "Jonathan, we will not continue to speak to each other for long. You are growing up and becoming wiser, and you already know many important things that I shall never know, like reading and writing and arithmetic. You now have many important tasks. You need to learn how to do many things, and that's very important." Here, the tree stopped, as was his custom. He pondered for a long while. Jonathan already knew these pauses that the old tree always made and did nothing to urge him on. He knew that for some time, something really important was going to be said, and he waited patiently for it. "What I am about to tell you, Jonathan, may sound a little odd or unclear, but it is nevertheless important for me that you should know this. If one wants to learn many things, one should also know how to forget." The tree paused again and then continued, "You will forget me, Jonathan. You will forget me for a long period of time, and so it should be." "How can I forget you?" Jonathan wondered and stopped the tree from talking. "I will never forget you. You are my friend. You are a good friend that never hurts or offends me and never forgets me. Listen, Jonathan." The tree now spoke with some severity that Jonathan had never heard from him before. "You will forget me, and so it should be. But deep down, in a place that never forgets, I will always be with you. Our friendship can always help you, even if you forget me completely. And one day, many years from now, you will be reminded of me, and I hope you will know what to do then." In the following months, Jonathan did not think about the things he had heard from the tree. Life went on quite as usual. He went to school, played with his friends, learned to play the violin and loved it. He read many books and loved those even more. But without noticing, and never meaning to do this, he gradually stopped speaking to the tree. Sometimes weeks would go by without thinking about the mulberry tree at all. But once, when some friends came to his house and they all played under the tree, Jonathan suddenly remembered their conversation and wanted to climb up into the tree's branches, to ask him questions, to hear his slow and warm voice, and to tell him all about himself. But his friends called him. He forgot what he wanted and returned to their games. And so the years went by. Jonathan grew up quickly and matured, and the tree slowly grew old. Jonathan was graduated from school and went on a long journey. The tree remained in the yard of Jonathan's house, bloomed and blossomed in the spring, gave fruit in the summer, shed its leaves in autumn, quietly and patiently listened to the earth breathing, to the stars, the course of the sun among the clouds, and to the moon becoming full, and lessening again with each and every month. Jonathan had long before forgotten all about the mulberry tree and the talks he used to have with him. He had far more important things to do. He visited all kinds of peculiar places in the world. He met many new friends, found a job, and then another one, and also learned interesting and important things. The tree never forgot Jonathan, and in his tree-like manner, slowly and quietly, he missed him. The years went by, and Jonathan eventually had his own little kids. Once in a while, Jonathan and his family would visit Grandpa and Grandma in their house, and then his children would come and play under the mulberry tree and among its branches. Jonathan would be watching them, and something in his depths would awaken, like a very old memory trying to arise from the abyss. But then, almost always, something would distract him, and he would return to his doings and forget. Chapter 6. In the meantime, Jonathan's parents grew older. It was hard for them to prepare their own food, to go shopping, or clean the house. They hardly ever went out to the mulberry tree in the yard. They loved their house and garden, the street and neighbors, and of course they loved the mulberry tree. But, as is often the case with old folk, they needed help, and so they moved to live next to Jonathan's family. Jonathan and his wife and children all helped them with everything. The house and the yard remained desolate and abandoned. And as is the case with places that are left to be without people's care, they too grow old and looked much neglected. Eventually, a new family moved in to live in Jonathan's old house. A year passed. Jonathan's father became sick and died after a few days. His mother got weaker and also became very ill. The doctor said she only had a few months to live. She lay in her bed most of the day, often suffering great pain. One day she called Jonathan from her bed and told him, "Jonathan, I am old and tired, and I think I shall soon die. My whole body feels that way." "Mother, stop," replied Jonathan, trying to console her. "You will get better again and live for many more years." "It is fine, Jonathan," his mother peacefully went on. "I have lived many good and happy years. I am not distressed about it. I know my time has come." And then, after a pause, she spoke on. "There is one thing I want to do before I die. I want to see our old house one last time, the street, the yard, and I want to part with those. I will be happy if you take me there, perhaps even tomorrow." Jonathan willingly agreed, and they decided that the following day he would take her to see their house for the last time. The next day, Jonathan helped his mother into the car and drove slowly and carefully to their old house. They stopped in front of the entrance, and Jonathan carefully took his mother out of the car. He supported her, walking her slowly with small steps until they entered the yard and stood in front of the old house. Jonathan's mother stood there inspecting it and looked drawn into herself and sad. Jonathan wanted to ask if she wanted to go any closer or sit on the porch, but then he saw tears in her eyes and said nothing. For a long time, his mother stood there silent, only looking with tearful eyes at the house and yard. Suddenly, she said to Jonathan, "Thank you, Jonathan. That is enough. Let us go back." Jonathan helped his mother as she started walking slowly to the street. But at that moment, he caught a glance of the mulberry tree that quietly and patiently stood in the corner of the yard, and he gazed at it for a long while. Now that Jonathan was already a grown man, the tree seemed to him quite old and no longer so very big. Jonathan escorted his mother back to the car, and they drove back. But the image of the mulberry tree did not leave his thoughts. He pondered about it while driving, and later in the day at his work, and when he came back home. He also thought about it before he went to bed. That night, Jonathan had strange dreams, and in all of them, the old mulberry tree appeared. In one dream, Jonathan was standing in the yard next to the house, not very far from the tree, reaching out to it, but something stopped him. He struggled, tried his hardest, ran and jumped, but he could not reach the old mulberry tree. The distance between them only grew wider. All night long, Jonathan struggled in his dreams, and in the morning woke up sweating as though he had been working so very hard in his sleep. And then, as he lay there between dream and wakefulness, and pondered over his dreams, he remembered. He sat up in his bed, completely bewildered. All his conversations with the mulberry tree came alive in his mind, especially their last one. "You will forget me, Jonathan," he remembered the tree saying to him. "But deep down, in a place that never forgets, I will always be with you. And one day, many years from now, you will be reminded of me, and I hope you will know what to do then." Jonathan, who was usually quite sleepy in the mornings, jumped out of bed, washed his face, got dressed, and without even having his usual coffee, he went out and drove to his old home. While driving, he wondered why he had forgotten the tree. How could this have happened? How could all those precious conversations with his old friend that had helped him so very much during his childhood have simply vanished from his thoughts and memories for so many years? It was early in the morning when he reached his old house. The street was still silent, most of the neighbors still in their beds. The birds of his childhood were chirping in his ears, and the sky was a cloudless blue. Slowly, and with much hesitation, he walked into the yard and immediately turned towards the mulberry tree. His long-forgotten memories of the hours he spent on the tree and their conversations all came back to him. Great gratitude filled his heart, along with a feeling of sadness. He approached the tree slowly and wondered whether he ought to. or could at all climb its thick branches. Eventually, he simply stood by its huge trunk, his heart filled with strong emotions and great love for the tree that had done so much for his sake. "Hello, Jonathan," he heard a voice coming from within himself. "I've been waiting for you. I knew all along you would eventually come and visit me. I'm glad of it." Jonathan was so overwhelmed that he could not hold back his tears, and he found himself sobbing with great emotion underneath the tree. "I had forgotten about you. I forgot you for so many years. I am sorry. I'm so very sorry," he finally said when he calmed down a bit. "It's fine. So it should be. I have been patiently waiting for you. For us trees, it isn't so hard to wait. For me, it was only a moment. The most important thing, Jonathan, is that you finally remembered and came back to me. I am very happy," said the tree. And as it had been many years before, Jonathan felt that he could hear the tree rustling with his leaves, laughing. Jonathan made an effort and climbed to the first branch of the tree. He sat on it and started telling all that he had been through. He didn't have to tell much. The tree knew many things about him. It had been following Jonathan's moves all these years. It knew of his wife and children. It knew his father had passed away, and it was also aware of the visit Jonathan and his mother had paid their old house the previous day. "How can you know so much about me?" Jonathan wondered. "I was so very detached, and I didn't even think about you." "But I was very close to you," the tree replied. "And when you are close to somebody and you love him, you also know things about him." Chapter 8. Jonathan was so happy he felt that something within him was warming up and softening, something that for many years had been hard and tight. He was taken back to his childhood, and a part of him felt like a child again, light, jolly, full of life and energy. He suddenly started understanding many things that for years had been riddles for him. He found himself sitting underneath the tree, leaning back on it, and pondering about the life he had had up to that day. Just as it had been in his childhood, he now felt that the tree was helping him with something important. As he sat there thinking, he heard the tree speaking to him softly and gently, as though taking care not to disturb his thoughts. "Jonathan, there is something I ought to tell you, something of importance. I am glad you came over to visit me. I have been waiting a long time to tell you this. I will now come to visit you often. We will be able to talk as we used to. I will never forget you, ever," Jonathan said, and dreamingly caressed the tree trunk. "I know you will not forget me," the tree said quietly, "but you will no longer be able to visit me. I am going to be cut down." "What?" Jonathan shouted and stood up on his feet. "Cut down? No way! I will never allow that to happen. Never!" "This can't be helped, Jonathan," the tree said quietly. "There are new people living here now. I stand in their way, and they are going to cut me down. But it is all right, Jonathan. I am not sad. I have lived long enough, and now it is time for me to move on." "No, absolutely not," said Jonathan. "I will talk to them. I won't let them cut you down." He agitatedly paced back and forth underneath the tree. "You have been my best friend for so many years, and I forgot all about you. I shall not forget you again." The tree waited a long while. He had patience, and he didn't speak, but only sent good thoughts to Jonathan, trying to calm him. And indeed, after some time, Jonathan calmed down a little, sat with his back leaning against the tree, and thought of his next move. Only then did he hear the tree speaking to him again, softly and patiently. "It's all right, Jonathan. My time has come. I shall gladly move on to another world. Don't worry about me. You cannot and mustn't prevent this. But I do have a small request." "What can I do for you?" Jonathan said quietly. "You have done so much for me." "Right underneath me grow some of my little children, little trees that sprang out from seeds of past years. Take out a few of those seedlings and plant them in different places. They will grow to be like me and will be able to speak to other kids and connect again between trees and human beings. Could you do that for me?" Early the following morning, Jonathan arrived at the mulberry tree equipped with a pitchfork and a hoe, and gently dug out 3 small mulberry seedlings that grew under the big tree. He dug around them and took them out, each with a large lump of earth around it. These lumps, which held the seedling's roots, he wrapped with old wet rags and drove with them to his house. On that same day, he planted one of the trees in his garden, one in the kindergarten yard, and one in a little thicket not far from his home. On his next visit to the mulberry tree, he saw a great big pit in the place where the tree had once been standing. Jonathan entered the yard and stood on the edge of the great pit. He felt deep sadness, but also knew that things were as they should be, and that the tree wished it so. Before he left, he found one of the mulberry tree's reddish-brown roots. He took the root with him wherever he went in his life, even when he traveled to far distant countries. Whenever he felt sadness or despair, whenever he needed help or advice, he would look at the root, think about the tree, and experience the special peacefulness he remembered from his conversations with the tree. "Dad," his youngest daughter asked him one evening, "is it possible to speak to plants and trees?" The end. Thank you for joining me for that lovely story of Jonathan and the tree, and we will have a new story that we will begin tomorrow. Have a great day.